Welcome to my navigation of the NDIS, a podcast by myself, Leonie Whiting, and my support worker, James Munson. On this podcast, we will be talking about the ups and downs, ins and outs of my experience navigating through the NDIS. Both James and I speak from our experiences only, as we do not work for the NDIA. Hi, Leonie Whiting here and James Munson.
That's me.
For doing my navigation through the NDIS. Today we're going to have a very different conversation because James's opinion on some of these subjects and mine are very different and come from a very different perspective in life. James being someone that does not have a disability and is capable of walking through life on his own 2 feet.
That's not true.
Me, being someone that does have a disability and relies a lot on the NDIS, and sees how other people rely on the NDIS, have that view in mind. So you may see a bit of a debate going on. So what we want to discuss is recently there was a section on Sky News about NDIS and how the cost of NDIS is becoming more and more unsustainable. Well, that too. And so therefore there was a participant that was hiring a gentleman to be intimate with her because she does not have a partner in her life and she is on the NDIS for her MS, and some people are objecting to the fact that she was using NDIS money to have this service provided for her.
Male escort.
Yeah,
it's a male escort. But he was coming as, so I think the thing to point out was he was coming as a support worker, but was a male escort.
Yes. So she was misappropriating the funds so that she was able to have him provided for her.
Can I just point out, she's misappropriating the funds, but for the right reasons.
Exactly.
Not for the wrong reasons.
Not for the wrong reasons,
but
that's
still
correct.
Misappropriating funds.
I believe that...
That's what
our opinion is...
Yeah, that's our opinion.
Is that... will you shut up? Our opinion is that we believe that there are certain circumstances in which it should be a normal thing to be provided for somebody. As said in the actual segment, there was a nurse, I believe, on there saying that there are people that have no hands, people that have no limbs, that require this to be done for them because they can't do it for themselves. And I think that's a very necessary thing. I think they've got enough going on in their lives with everything else that they have to deal with, and to also have to suffer from sexual tension would be very, very discomfort for them. And I believe in this particular segment that under particular guidelines, it's quite all right for something like that to be provided for. But in saying that, I also do think that there are people out there that could probably afford to have it done off their own funds, and I think that needs to be something that needs to be discussed between them and their plan coordinator. I am not a great supporter of being self-funded. I believe that it leads to monies being
Am I allowed to say things now?
Yeah.
Right. So let's stay with we're going to stay with the sex workers for a bit.
Okay.
And then we'll move on to self-managed. Right?
All right.
So that sort of sex worker thing, it was in at the beginning, is my understanding. it was in at the beginning, so people were allowed to use NDIS funds, and then it got quashed quite early on.
Yeah.
But obviously, like on that video, she was doing it sort of going around the corner to be able to do it.
Yeah.
To touch on what you said, which is if you can't do it, then why not be able to do it? So generally with NDIS, so if a person needs something, they have to get a report to say that they need that thing to be able to do it. So why not for that?
That's exactly right.
You know what? I suppose the only other thing that it comes into it is that obviously a lot of, I'm only presuming that a lot of the sex worker industry is unregulated and may be a little bit shady still, but then that's where I think that they're kind of worrying about putting money. I'm just guessing here. This is just...
But they also provide a sex education and sex understanding module within NDIS so that you can go and learn all about it,
Yes.
but you're not allowed to perform it.
Yes, so Northcott do a sexual education thing. It's very good for people with disabilities, and I suppose I've got two disabled brothers, and thinking about how that sort of would work for them. Why do they not deserve
Exactly,
it?
and
No.
that's my whole point, that if it's okay for Bob, then it should be okay for Sarah. And that's how I see it. And I agree it should be regulated, and I do believe there should be certain circumstances that need to be evident for them not to be able to provide this service for themselves. But I don't think that it should be disregarded as something that a normal person is quite freely allowed to express their sexuality and enjoy that sort of part of their life, but someone with a disability isn't, and I think that's wrong.
Yeah. So I think that, you've got the, what was that lady's name?
Jackie Lambry.
No.
I didn't write the
Anyways,
lady's
there was a
name.
lady in the video,
Sarah,
and she was sort of talking about, obviously the people without limbs, and, why do they not deserve to have that kind of thing? We get that, but you've also, you've got the government has to be seen not to be doing the wrong thing. So, they have got to be cautious about where that funds are going. So if they're, funding a brothel and that's, owned by shady people, that, then by essence, they're going like that way. So, I can understand the government's point of view. I would assume that there would have to be very, very heavily monitored, that kind of section. But yeah, definitely some kind of report along the lines of, who did you use? Bob. Bob can't, so then he requires help.
So say Bob...
Or what kind of help and how and all that kind of stuff.
For instance, say Bob had a very normal life up until he decided to be a soldier. And then he goes to, I think it's Iran, where they've been fighting recently. Afghanistan. And walks on a landmine, loses his hand, loses his foot, loses something to stop him from being able to...
masturbate, you don't want to say it.
No, to be able to attract a partner as easily as someone that has all their limbs and is able to perform this on his own right. And if he loses his hands, I can imagine that would be very difficult for a man to perform any sort of sexual act on himself because he no longer can. And that's where I think Bob is entitled to having that performed for him. But in the same line, me as someone that suffers with Parkinson's, and my hands are very affected, as are lots of different limbs within my bodies, with my tremors, with the stiffening of my muscles, with not being able to function, doing things that I normally would have been able to do when I was younger, now finds that certain things that a woman would do to please herself becomes a difficult thing to do. And so I'm very lucky in the sense that I have a partner, but that's not the point. The point is, if I didn't have a partner, like I struggle to write now. I can't write very well at all. So, you know, your hands don't do what you want them to do. Not that I'm saying that I want someone to come and do it for me, but I'm just saying I would like to have the option to do that if that was the case. And so, yeah, that's my argument, is that, you know, there are going to be people out there that in their younger part of their life knew what sex was about, knew the enjoyment of sex, knew how pleasure and everything was important to relieve tension and all sorts of different things. And then not being able to do that would be extremely difficult. It would add another level of mental health and all sorts of different issues. And as you can see, I struggle with the whole sex conversation, but it's something that needs to be spoken about. And if someone who finds it extremely uncomfortable to talk about, as I do, can do it on a podcast, then other people should start talking up about it as well.
100%. And, you know, it's nothing to be ashamed of, and there's nothing wrong about it. You know, and it's part of life, really.
It is.
I'd be ashamed of it.
I'm not ashamed of it.
No. I'm talking to our
yeah,
audience.
our audience. Yeah. No, that's fine.
All right. So now we're going to move on to. So I think something else that sort of came up in the video was there's obviously the blowout. They're talking about the blowout, which was prevalently going to be obvious because, you know, NDIS started off as Newcastle, like a trial run in Newcastle or the Hunter area, you know, and then sort of went out, and then they added mental health. Now, mental health is just a different being. You know, everybody's got mental health. Everybody's got it. It's how you look after it and how, you know, things affect you. Obviously, people have got different chemicals in their brains, and people have ABIs, and, you know, there's obviously lots of different brain functions, things that happen. But
it's such a broad spectrum.
And it's a broad spectrum, and it's such a growing space.
It is.
So
if you look at me, for instance...
that's all right, I was just talking.
If you look at me, for instance, I have Parkinson's, which is a condition that starts within the brain. So that there is classed as mental health. But now they're also including people that have depression, people that have schizophrenia. That's not the term they use these days. They use bipolar or something like that.
Schizophrenia is still a thing.
And so, you know, it's all included. And so they've opened up a bucket of worms that's going to progressively grow, especially in today's society where there is a lot of pressure. There's a pressure because people are losing their homes. There's a pressure because the interest rates are going up and the cost of living's going up. All these things can impact on your mental health. And so they need to be able to say this type of mental health, not mental health in its entirety, I believe. Well,
they actually spoke about the two main words to get onto the NDIS are...
reasonable and necessary.
No, not reasonable and necessary. Something on lifelong.
I wrote it down.
Permanent.
And significant.
Was it? Permanent,
perfect.
There you go.
And
permanent, significant. I was wrong.
Reasonable and necessary.
Yeah, so permanent and significant. So, you know, mental health, you know, does fit that category because, like, everybody's got it. So I've had my mental health issues, and, you know, it's very fluctuating. So whether, you know, I could go, you know what, well, it's still there. So, and they actually spoke about doctor shopping on the video
Yeah, they
as well.
did. Yeah.
And so I could probably go around and get someone to say, it's permanent, because really it is, because everyone's got it and it's always there. But is it worthy of being on the NDIS? Well, from my point, it's not. But there are people, like they said on the video, that there are people out there that are getting on just because they can.
So yeah, just let me explain that a little bit. If someone is like, when I lost a child, my first child, and I went into a deep depression, but it lasted for a period of time and then it passed. And you get used to the fact that you've lost a child. It never goes away and the pain never goes away, but you learn to deal with it, is probably what I'm saying. But then if you are someone that suffers with PSD, so that means that your brain has been affected by stuff that you have seen ongoing, day in, day out, and you can't get it out of your head. So you don't function properly. That is a whole heap of different mental health and a whole heap of different depression. So if it's a short-term depression, which is what James was talking about, or a long-term depression, which is what PSD is about, then I think that's the easiest way that I can sort of explain the differences in mental health.
It's a lot more complex than that.
Yeah, it is,
so
but for someone...
more complex than that. So, but I think the thing that I was trying to point out is that, mental health requires work. It requires,
it does.
Going to a therapist. And for me, Medicare should have been extended for mental health. So you get your 12 sessions.
12 sessions.
Right, that's one a month. One a month's not enough.
10 actually, it's 10 sessions.
That's not enough. You need to be going quite regularly, especially if it's right at the main point. You need to be going quite regularly. Obviously, my wife's a counsellor, and people can't see her. She's, doing her masters of counselling, or she's not doing the masters of counselling, but she's doing a masters. Why is she any less qualified to do it than a psychologist? Like, that blows me away, but that's a different story. But the Medicare was in place to do that. Whereas if someone that's suffering from mental health and then having someone come to your house to help you around the house, yes, that helps, but does that help you move forward in your mental health? I don't think that does, because that touches on another point that the video said, which was, that we want to see outcomes, and yes. I think that's been lost in the NDIS.
And there are people that will be able to move forward and live some sort of normality of life within their disability. But there are some people that their disability is going to eventually kill them. And so the reality of them improving and moving forward, they may move forward mentally, but physically their body's going to let them down. And so therefore there's a fine line between that, and I think that until they've lived in someone's shoes that actually has a disability, that they can't really say that that's how it should be structured. I think it should be on each individual case, and then what is the best for that particular diagnosis and that particular disability, and how is that going to structure. Now, I know that in the future, my help is going to have to be expanded, because I will physically not be able to do things for myself. I may be one of the very lucky ones that with Parkinson's that can live through life as relatively normal as possible, and I hope that is the case. But there are those out there that you lose the use of their hands because their tremors are so severe, or the stiffness of their joints have caused their fingers to curl up and they can no longer even pick up a cup. So, and it happens with many disorders. It's not just Parkinson's that happens to. You know, people with MS lose the use of their limbs, and their body starts to shut down very quickly. People with motor neurons has a very similar sort of thing. They no longer can use their limbs. They're not able to feed themselves. They can't toilet themselves. They can't get themselves in and out of bed. I worked in this industry before I was diagnosed, and I'm very aware of what extremes, starting with a client that's only just been diagnosed and watching them deteriorate to somebody that you no longer recognise or who can't even speak to you. So it's just a particular glint they get in their eye where you know, okay, they know I'm here. Which leads me into something else that I'm really passionate about. At the moment, there are a lot of cowboys in the NDIS industry. They are not qualified. They don't have any certificates to say they are qualified to do certain particular jobs. And I'm really, really passionate about this. I did my education. I am a grade 3 high needs caregiver by trade. That's what I was. And now you have people that are going into people's homes and doing things to high needs people with no qualifications at all. None of that has any guidelines. Now, prior to it being NDIS, we had to have qualifications to go into a high needs care home. We had to have knowledge of what that client was going through, what had brought them to where they were for the day, so that when you walked into that home, you had a good understanding of what that client was experiencing, why they were in the situation they were in, and what type of care they were needing and needed to be provided for them. And that doesn't happen now, which really makes me very angry, because I think it's only going to be a matter of time and a client is going to have something serious happen to them, and the caregiver is not qualified to have done the job in the first place.
I think that wasn't in the video. Very good point though. But also that leads on to regulation.
It was in the video. The elderly gentleman touched on it, saying that there are too many people in the industry today that do not know what they're doing.
Okay, there it was.
There you go.
But yeah, regulation. We've touched on it before. That's where I'm with Leonie, and we're both passionate about regulation. You know, obviously they talked about the NDIS and having a review brought forward. And because it probably has blown out, because they, you know, when they first did it, the numbers that they had were nowhere near the numbers that came onto the NDIS. And that was because, you know, they didn't take into account people's multiple diagnoses. They didn't take into account, you know, some of the people that weren't on disability support pensions, that were just on the pension. You know, there's a whole number of things. It's also because now, if you're younger than 65 and you come onto the NDIS, you don't then go back onto the age pension. You stay on the NDIS the whole way through, which means obviously there's more people coming onto it. So I think that either people didn't quite grasp how it was going to function at the start, or there was just some numbers that weren't available. But who?
Veteran Affairs.
Oh yeah, we're up to here. We're up to here. So yeah, so then we were like, yeah, obviously we want better regulation. So for me, my proposal to you, Bill Shorten, is that they should get rid of self-managed.
Exactly.
Self-managed should be gone.
Because they don't know how to handle their money.
Nope.
They just don't.
Well, obviously they've got those. There are some people that have got their parents looking after their self-managed, but I think that to regulate something and to have self-managed would be inconceivable.
Because they're using funds that are given to them for something that's necessary on things that are not.
So then to regulate plan managed, and obviously the NDIA managed is already regulated, so that if they regulate plan managed, and then people like myself, so I'm an independent support worker, and I've got to do something. I don't know what it is, whether it be have qualifications, whether it be putting myself onto a regulatory site so that people can see that I've done something to get that, whether I've got to fill out, XY paperwork each year to show that I've got my first aid certificate, got my disability cert 3 or whatever. There needs to be something, because...
Can I just
No,
interrupt?
you can't. I'm talking. This is my podcast.
When I was working in the field, every year we had to have, or I think it's every 3 years, we had to have our police check done working with children. We had to do our first aid, so that was always up to date. We had to have our qualifications up to date, so that because we're most of the time in property on our own, at the very most with two workers, and so there was always the OH&S, which it's not called that now, it's called work safety or something. And so we had to have that up to date as well, and we had to have that certified. And if that wasn't up to date and certified, we weren't allowed to do the job. Yeah. Whereas that's not regulated anymore, and it should be.
So, in essence, you should have those things, right? But because there's no one to govern a person like me, I could not have a police check. I could not have a first aid. I mean, I do, but I could not have those things.
Yeah.
And it's up to... They've left it up to themselves,
they're
up to the
individual.
individual.
They're asking the client to make sure that the person that's working for them has the things that they need to have.
No one checks it.
And some of the clients aren't capable of doing that sort of stuff. And that's what self-managed is all about. They have to do all chasing up themselves. And a lot of disabled people are trying to get out of the way of their own disability, let alone trying to chase up all this other stuff that has to go on in their lives. It's not that easy for them. No. I get extremely anxious when it comes to making sure that my bills are paid, making sure that everything is done correctly, which is why I am not self-funded. I know it would just send my condition into a place that I struggle every day to stay out of. So I'm managed, and I'm happily managed, and I need to continue to be managed. It will not be something that will change for me, because my anxiety doesn't wear for it. And when my anxiety is at its highest, I can't even walk. My tremors are so traumatic that I can't put one foot in front of the other. And I don't want to be in that position in life. It's not comfortable. And it's hard enough for someone like me, who was an extremely independent woman that ran a business for 20 years with my ex-husband and managed a team of workers and raised a family and did all those sorts of things without any problem. Now I struggle to even go and see my specialist without getting myself into some sort of anxiety state. And it's beyond my control. I can't stop myself from getting anxious. As much as I try to stop myself getting anxious, I get more anxious. So, and that affects my condition very dramatically. It changes it 100%. And it's... James has seen me in that situation. It's not a good situation for me to be in, so I avoid it by having myself plan managed. Exactly.
So, I think that other things that need to be regulated are paperwork. So, in essence, I could support Leonie with zero paperwork.
Yeah.
Is it right? No, it is not. You want to have a
contract.
Yeah, so a contract, which is a service agreement, and then you want to know how much it's going to cost, because otherwise I could charge whatever I want, whenever I want.
Which is
so
wrong.
I would, obviously that's called a schedule of supports. So that outlines the line item, the cost, how many units you're going to use per. Like I do it weekly, so that you can then calculate for a year. But that's really,
Yeah,
that
these
should
are
be
the things.
that should be a regulation. That should be
But
you need to have
a-
that stuff to be
it's-
able to get that money.
It's a twofold thing too. It protects James because he's given it to me in writing, so I can't argue the point with him about what he's getting paid because I have agreed to it. And it protects you because he can't charge me more than what he's already said he's going to charge me, unless, of course, there's been an increase in government funding, not funding, as in a wage increase, which there was not that long ago.
June.
And then James had to redo his schedule because he had a pay increase from the government. So, a government's recommendation, or was it a government?
That's just the NDIS price increase.
Yeah. So you need to be aware of these things, and it is important
Can I
of
just
these
stop you
things.
there? You don't need to be aware. This is where we were talking about regulations. That should be a regulation. That should be
Yes, I know.
in writing. And it needs to be done.
Exactly, but it's also if you are plan managed, then this is what your plan coordinator should be doing for you, and a support coordinator should be doing for you. And unfortunately, there are lots of cowboys in that industry as well. They say they're going to help the client, and they don't give diddly squat. So that needs to be more regulated as well. And I know it took me 4 plan coordinators before I got a really good one.
Yeah. So yeah, no, but again, back to the, sort of regulation. It's an all-encompassing thing because it's not just like support workers and being a self-managed or self-employed independent support worker. It's there are independent support companies now, that don't necessarily cater to the NDIS managed or NDIA managed. That's just plan management. But they're out there. They've got support coordinators employed. They've got plan managers employed. They've got independent support workers, and none of it's regulated.
No.
Like that's nuts to me. You've got people taking people on holidays. What does that improve? Like they're not like yes, I deserve. Everyone deserves a holiday. Everyone deserves a holiday. But you know what? My brother saves up his money to go on his holidays, and he pays for them. And obviously, the support worker goes along with him. But it's just I think it's just a bit of a free for all at the moment, and that's just my opinion. All right,
I do believe
rant over.
that there are certain cases like that. I also believe that there are some clients that are very capable of surviving a weekend without a support worker. I do.
Started on weekends.
I don't have
Public
anyone.
holidays.
Shush! I'm talking. I don't have anyone working for me on the weekend. I don't need to have the taxpayers pay an exuberant amount of money.
Double.
More than double.
It's crazy.
For someone to be here on the weekend to do my everyday living stuff. I do have to have a shower assist every second Sunday because there's no one in the house except me, and I'm not supposed to shower without someone being in the home. But that is the only bit of personal care that I have or support care that I have on a weekend. I can function doing things on my own, and if I don't, I've got a good support mechanism that I have people that I can ring if there's an emergency. But that's not to say that there are not people that have disabilities that require someone to go in and get them out of bed and set them up for the day and do all that sort of stuff.
Necessary stuff.
But I don't think sitting around the house and playing cards or doing a bit of cooking or anything like that or going out shopping needs to happen on the weekend.
No.
I think you can do that during the week.
Because you can't put everyone into a basket, right?
No.
Because people with disabilities is such a broad spectrum, right? So there are people that work during the week that on a Saturday and a Sunday they want to go out, right? But there are groups of people that go out on there are people that take groups of people out on a Sunday that don't necessarily need to go out on a Sunday, but it makes a bucket load more money.
It does, yeah.
Like, come on.
So yeah, I just think that needs to be a little bit more regulated as well. So in getting back to the video, in talking about Jackie
We
Lambrie,
ranted for way too long.
talking about Jackie Lambrie, we appreciate a lot of what Jackie does, and we're not criticising in her in any shape, form. But she did bring to my attention that the Veteran Affairs are not getting what the NDIS people are getting. Well, that's wrong. These people served their country. They deserve to have everything that someone with a disability has. And if they're not getting that through that, it is what she said.
That's what
she said that the veterans are on NDIS because they can't get it through Veteran Affairs. That is what she said.
Yeah. So she's not saying they don't deserve it.
No, that's not. I never said that.
That's exactly what she said.
I did not. I said.
That's what she said.
It is
We're
not.
going to watch this back.
James, shut up. It's going forever now.
Oh, yeah, it's my fault.
I am saying that if we are deserving it on NDIS, then they deserve it on Veteran Affairs.
Yes.
They should deserve exactly what we are getting because they have served their country, and if they've come back with a disability, then that should be taken care of because they served our country. Like anybody that has given their life to make sure that we have our freedom. As far as I'm concerned, then if they're on the NDIS, well, that's government shame because they should be looking after them under Veteran Affairs. And if they're not, then yes, I believe they should be on the NDIS. And that's all I've got to say about that, Miss Jackie Lambrie. So that's it.
I don't think that's what Jackie Lambrie said. But anyway, she did point on a few other things that, obviously we've sort of discussed now that hit the mark. Like she was talking about, regulation, and she's like, it's a bit of a blowout, and so she did hit a lot of it on the mark. So anyway,
so that's
her.
And for anyone that doesn't know, Malcolm Turnbull is now the minister in charge of NDIS.
Who's the Prime Minister then? That's Bill Shorten, isn't it? Sorry, my bad. My bad.
Oh my God.
Oh.
So yeah, if you want to have a complaint, that's the man you need to talk to.
Not me. And
we've touched on
that.
Self-funding and
done everything.
Autism.
Nearly 40 minutes.
There was also a thing on the autism spectrum. Well, there's lots of spectrums out there. It's not just autism, and a lot of these things for a long, long time have not been diagnosed, and now they are being diagnosed. And yes, it's a very vast, broad field that people have slipped through for a long, long time. I'm extremely dyslexic. I have been all my life, but that wasn't realised until I was in my late 20s, nearly 30 years of age, before someone said, Leonie, you're dyslexic. This is why you struggle with your learning. So, in my era, when I was growing up, you would just be pushed to the outside of the class saying you're a difficult child, you don't want to learn. And this is what happened with people with autism, with a lot of other different spectrums were just not, it wasn't recognised. And so therefore there are lots of people now in their adulthood or in their late age that are now it's brought to their attention, well, this is the spectrum you're within. So unfortunately, yes, it is growing, and it's growing fastly because it's been now recognised in people of my age as well as people coming through. Today, it's not a new thing, and so that's all I have to really say about the autism spectrum.
Yeah, so I think when they were talking about the autism spectrum, they were talking about the part where it was greatly underestimated when they evaluated the NDIS, and I think that is a part of it too. So that obviously, because like you said, the spectrum's so broad. Like I'm on the spectrum, so therefore could I go? Not really, because I'm only a level I'm level 1.
I think it should be
lower.
level graded, absolutely.
It is level graded.
But I just think that people need to be aware that, you know, I went to school in the 80s. In the 80s, autism and hyperactiveness and what's the word? ADD and all those different things weren't even thought about. They were just difficult children. They needed to concentrate more. They didn't want to learn.
Yes,
they, you know, put in the
Sorry,
too
no.
hard baskets, so we would just punish them instead. And unfortunately, now they're realising that these things are what they are, and these people actually fit within a spectrum. And the reason why they struggled so much at school is because they just couldn't get it. So, yeah.
But yeah, so that does fit into the sort of that whole, you know, blowout sort of thing, because people
Exactly.
weren't there and, you know, weren't accounted for. So that's
us today, because we've been rambling on for far too long. But thank you for listening to us anyway. And the video that the news feed that we're talking about is on my Facebook page, my navigation of the NDIS. If you want to have a watch of that before you listen to this, or if you've listened to this and then want to have a watch of that, it's entirely up to you.
The link will be in the comments section down below.
Okay, have a lovely day. Bye.
And just so you know, you can let us know if you liked it, or drop us a question or something like that.
Yeah,
But yes.
we're here.
All right, no worries.
Bye.